Hey everybody, Rosa here, and welcome to Umineko Chapter 7, the penultimate episode. We are getting towards the end here, and I'm super excited to start this chapter. It should be... They're all interesting, but this one, I believe, Byrne is going to be the game master, the reader. So I imagine this will be an interesting one, and I think at the end, in the tea party... they were saying stuff about how, not really caring for so much about the story, but looking for answers. So, are we going to get some answers in this chapter? We'll have to see. So, without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's start Chapter 7. Right, Requiem of the Golden Witch. Good morning. Today is the day of the funeral for the Golden Witch and her game. Okay, the days of the game have now ended, and fond memories are all that remain. Here, the cold, hard truth will be revealed, and the game will meet its death. Okay, so that's, like I said, it seems like it's all about getting the answers now. The game is dead, Beatrice's game is dead, and now it's all about answers. So that makes me excited. So, alright, let's crack into it. Alright, so this is looking like a funeral, and this looks like it's all purple like it's in the dream world, but it seems maybe it's like the chapel that's in the mansion. The suspects were gathered in a room, and several inquisitors were reporting on the results of their investigation. Their uniforms closely resembled those of Eisern Jungfrau, but they were slightly different. Also different were the badges signifying their department. Wow, it went from, all solemn to, alright, we got this hyped up music going already? Alright. Then came the sound of someone clapping their hands once. It was the lead female inquisitor. It was her signal that all reasoning had been completed. At the other end of her pointing finger was a quivering maid with frightened eyes. Her name was... No, that wasn't important. God damn it. I was like, maid. Shannon. That's the only maid I can think of, female maid. Assuming that we're in the, the real world here. All that mattered now was that she could have freely entered the locked room study where the victim was found. And furthermore, that it had been proven that her claimed alibi for the time of the crime was contradictory. Shaking, the maid tried to control her illogical pleading, but all her arguments had already been completely destroyed. This is definitely looking like an Erica game, even though Erica is, I'm assuming, dead at this point. She died in the last episode or chapter. This really does seem like we're back to kind of like a murder mystery whodunit. That is Shannon. Or no. Nope, that is not her. Okay, so this is like a completely different story? What?
誰がいかにして犯したか、それのみが立証できれば十分であると知りたまえ。 謹敬謹んで申し上げる。ミステリーに動機は不要であると知り。
Yeah, this is like a cold game. Like, they don't care about the reasoning why somebody did something, why Beatrice does these things. All they care about is figuring out who did it and how. The Inquisitor spoke coldly. Alright, now we're back to this again. After finishing her witch's prayer, Virgilia stepped back from the casket, so it's like Beatrice's funeral, which lay on an altar bedecked with many beautiful roses. And Badler. In her place, Badler moved to the front of the casket, wearing his territory lord's cape. Though the cape was supposed to represent dignity and majesty, it somehow made Badler look smaller. Badler held a book with a majestic binding in his hand. It was a game record that had just been written. Or perhaps it was a tale, a game, or else a fragment. Written in it was the dream that would be more enjoyable for her than any other. Badler pressed it against his forehead and contemplated for some time. Then he kissed it and laid it gently in the casket. It was placed upon her chest. It made her look like a little girl clutching her favorite stuffed animal as she drifted off to sleep.
これは俺からお前に捧げる唯一の物語だ。
So is this the story from the last game? Because the thing is he still the territory lord? Because I thought, like, Byrne was going to be the game master for this game. Anyway. This tale will be shut up with you in your casket for all eternity, so no one will be able to read it except for you in your casket.
猫箱に閉ざされた
There's the cat box.
不変不可侵の永遠の物語。
だから誰にも物語を汚せない。否定できない。反論できない。俺とこいつだけの二人だけの唯一絶対の真実。
And now we're switching back to the Inquisitors.
クソ誰が。
Oh, okay, what's this? A man dashed through a town wrapped in twilight. The daytime hustle and bustle of this charming old-fashioned village, which combined tradition with stylistic beauty, the classic style of the last century, now seemed like a mere dream. The orange-setting sun was already hidden behind the clock tower, and the narrow alleyways were rapidly descending into darkness. As the gas lights began to turn on, they only made the darkness of the twilight stand out all the more. The man sprinted. There was no time. He had to hurry. He'd had several experiments to do and things he had to check, and it had all taken longer than he'd expected. What in the world? Are we being introduced to? It is chapter 7, and we are having potentially another new character introduced to us? Shouldn't be surprised. In the mystery genre, the motive or the whodunit is given the least precedence. The only thing needed for a murder to exist is for a culprit to commit it. No part of that requires a motive, so it's usually the most ignored element. In fact, these days, there are even some who call it an unnecessary element in mystery stories.
"私たちは彼女の最後の眠りがどれほど楽しいものであるかを知っています。
This chapter has just started, and already there is so much whiplash going on. I just already, like, even this late into the game, I'm just thrown into it, and I'm just like, I don't even. When you think you start to understand what's going on, and then I'm just like, what?
だから何人たりとも彼女の眠りを妨げることはできないでしょう。楽しい夢に微笑むこの眠りを妨げられるものなどいるわけもないのですから。さあ、私たちはもう 立ち去りましょう。私たちが賑やかにしていたら彼女の夢を眠りを覚ましてしまいますよ。
そうだな。寝ている子には毛布をかけて部屋を暗くして静かに立ち去るのが決まりってもんだ。
After looking at the casket one last time, Virgilia turned around quietly. Badler did the same, but then he stopped and turned to face the rose-covered altar. Badler said his final words with his heart. As long as those words didn't leave his mouth, no one would ever know what they were. However, those words of the heart caused Badler's expression to change several times. At first he frowned sadly, then his face clouded with remorse, and then changed to a resigned, bittersweet smile. It flashed through several varied expressions. Then the final expression that crossed his face was surprisingly a gentle smile. Something rose to Badler's lips. However, he bit it back down. There could certainly be no words to express the many feelings he kept in his chest. So, saying anything aloud would probably be crude. Badler understood this and stopped himself from speaking once more with a resigned smile.
ありがと
お礼を言われるようなことは何も。
う。後を頼む。
After seeing Virgilia nod back at him, Badler turned away from the altar one more time and left the chapel. Virgilia also disappeared, and all disturbances that might have interrupted her blissful sleep were gone. And now we are back to this again. The Inquisitors listened with calm, no scornful gazes. They listened to the frantic babbling of the maid accused of murdering her master. However, nothing she said could bury the fault in her own alibi. They were all mere emotional arguments. I loved and respected my master so much. I had no motive for killing him. No matter how much she spoke, it only made her look more and more like the floundering true culprit struggling pathetically. The whodunit and howdunit had been satisfied. As for the whydunit, the motive, the heart, who would care? No matter how much she spoke of her gratitude for her master, who had graciously fed her and given her a job when she'd been left to starve on the streets after various misfortunes, that didn't help her case in the slightest in the mystery genre. Therefore, her motive didn't matter. All of that could just be squeezed out of the culprit afterwards. Yes, it's very Erica-like, right? An Inquisitor took out a roll of parchment and held it forth, cutting off the maid's sobs and protests.
あなたがいかにして犯行に及んだか、その告発は大法院にて受理され、あなたの逮捕を許可したことを知りたまえ。これがあなたの逮捕状なりや。動機など不要。犯人の特定には一切不要のものと知りたまえ。その上で慎んで申し上げる。我らが SSVD は罪を認めぬ犯罪者に真実を告白させる強制的手段を持つと知りたまえ。我らが異端審問官が正義にて祝福された審問具にてあなたの獅子を絞り上げて焼いて潰して引き伸ばして吊るし上げ、そこより赤き真実を絞り出してみせることを申し上げたてまつる。自白すらも不要。補佐官一同、そのメイドを逮捕したてまつれ。
私じゃないです。私は旦那様を殺して。
Okay. Hello, who are you?
やめな。
Here we go, new character, and for once it's actually a man. It's usually all female characters that are introduced as new, but we actually have a dude. Alright.
そのメイドは犯人じゃね
And red hair like Badler, I wonder if there's some sort of connection there. He's got like a nautical necklace. I'm just trying to kind of like gauge, like, what's his deal? A man kicked the door open, and the Inquisitors were all shocked at the sight of him. Obviously someone who cares about the motive, similar to Badler, and not just about the, like, you know, who done it and how done it.
なぜあなたがここにいるものなり。この事件はもうあなたの担当ではないと知りたまえ。
I am so confused right now.
うるせえ。アリバイがないやつを一人見つけたらそいつが犯人なのか。 犯行には動機が、心がいらねえってのか。犯行はな、人が犯すんだよ。心がねえ事件なんて存在しねえ。心を無視した推理なんざ俺は絶対に認めね
え。あなたのホワイダニット至上主義の主張には辟易するものと知りたまえ。ホワイダニットなど無用。審問すればかようなものを容易に絞り出せるものなりや。大法院もその女が犯人であることを認めたものなり。
大法院はそのメイド以外の全員にアリバイがあるならきっとそうなんだろうというお前の独りよがりを鵜呑みにしただけだ。他の被疑者のアリバイが崩れれば白紙に戻る。他の連中のアリバイも無様なもんじゃない。大広間の時計の音は正確に正午を刻んだか。勝手口の犬は全員に吠えるのか。確かにお前はメイドのアリバイの偽証を崩した。それは見事なもんさ。だがそれで終わりなのか。メイドに犯行が可能でもそれを行う動機はあるのか。他の人間のアリバイは完璧なのか。他にもアリバイを偽証している人間がいる。それを探すことを怠るな。犠牲者に怨恨は、金銭関係でトラブルは、動機を捨てるな。心を捨てるな。
So, I guess now we're kind of getting back into the, so I feel like chapter 5 was kind of like the howdunits. The last episode was like who, you know, like who's the culprit, who are they really? And this one seems to be the why. At least that's what it seems like, is we're talking a lot about motive. It seems to be the focus.
動機なんて後付けでどうでもいいなんて、そんな乾ききったミステリーごっこは卒業しちまいな。
But then Burn and Feather had also talked about like this game was going to be played without like really any love, and it's just about finding answers. So I don't know how this one's going to go.
メイドが犯人でないなら、なぜに彼女はアリバイを偽証するものなりや。そしてそれを問うことも茶番。審問し赤き真実を絞り出し、犯行時刻の全てを赤き地で署名させるだけで良いものと知りたまえ。
ああ、そうだろうな。お得意の拷問で全てを神の目線から客観的に赤裸々に絞り出せばいいさ。でもな、言っておく。心のねえミステリーと推理のやり方はな、俺が絶対に認めねえ。すでに本事件は本館に継承されたるものなり、ここに命令書もあるものなり。さあ補佐官一同、構うことはなしと知りたまえ。そのメイドの逮捕を命じるものなりや。
When she gave this order, her subordinates hesitated, looking back and forth between their superior and that man.
させねえよ。本当の犯人は他にいる。動機から推理可能だ。アリバイトリックなんざ古典通り。心を忘れるんじゃねえ。心など不要なり。犯行可能な疑わしき人物を導き出し、審問して赤き真実を絞り出せばいい。万一犯人でなかったなら、別の疑わしい容疑者を審問にかければいいだけなりや。そんなのは推理じゃねえ。退きたまえ。その女を逮捕するものなりや。そのメイドが犯人であると知りたまえ。使用人が犯人であることを禁ず。
Oh, it is forbidden for a servant to be the culprit. Now, is that the case in... Hold on. Is that just the case in whatever this thing they're doing? Or is this the case for, like, you know, our overarching story? Because if that's the case, well, shit, you know, my suspect from, like, past chapters has been, like, you know, Shannon and or Canon. So I'm like, well, fuck. The words of power blasted away the aides who were trying to arrest the maid.
バンダイン20足。
Van
第
Dyne.
11足。
Wait, you're throwing more stuff at me? Like I had the Nox Decalogue, and now there's Van Dyne's 20 rules?
このメイドを拷問したかったら第二夫人とその愛人のアリバイをもう一度洗いな。
その二人には犯行時刻の明白なアリバイが。
Do those rules also apply to the Umineko mystery? Because, shit, back to square one then.
あの程度でアリバイかよ。ボンクラのお前に分かるように説明してたら、主席を名乗りたかったら、その程度の捜査と推理を見せてみな。それまで、このメイドへの逮捕状は俺が預かるぜ。
ならあなたにそのメイドが犯行を犯さなかったことが証明できるなりや。犯行時刻に彼女が台所を離れていたことは明らかと知りたまえ。彼女は犯行時刻にどこで何を。その女にも本官にもあなたにも誰にも証明は不可能なりや。なればこそ審問の拷問具で赤き真実を絞り出すほかなきなり。
He literally just said a red truth about how the servant can't be the culprit.
真犯人からはシヘドでも真実でも好きなだけ絞り出してやれ。だがな、真犯人じゃねえ人間へはいかなる審問も拷問も許さね
え。だからこそあなたは甘いと批判されるものなり。疑わしきは全て審問。それが我ら異端審問官の魔女裁判であると知りたまえ。
そうだな、俺たちは異端審問官だ。邪悪な魔女を撃つ、それが商売さ。だが万一にも市民を傷つけてはならない、疑ってはならない。人間は誰しも自分だけの真実を持つ。それは罪を犯した時にのみ暴かれる。俺たちにはそれを暴く資格が与えられている。だがな、ねえんだよ。
何が。
罪なき人間の罪なき真実を暴く資格なんざ、たとえ神様にだって与えられちゃいねえんだよ。
The maid finally realized he was trying to protect her.
どちら様か存じませんが、ありがとうございます。私本当に犯人じゃないんです。
んなことは知ってる。お前の彼氏は全てを投げ出してお前のためにアリバイを証言するという。感謝しとけ。あの若造は名誉も肩書きもお前に比べたら大したもんじゃねえと言いやがったぜ。
そんなことをしたらあの人は。
それには及ばねえ。恋人たちの秘め事を暴くのは三流雑誌の仕事だ。ミステリーじゃねえ。俺は心のない推理は絶対に許さねえ。
This is not just the red hair, he's definitely given off Battler vibes to me. Like a Battler who's ascended to the next level. Then for the first time, the man's sullen expression relaxed, and he patted the maid's head unreservedly.
彼氏と幸せになりやがれ。だが勤務中に相引きするのはあまり褒められねえな。時々にしとくんだね。
ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。
These words were heard only by the two of them. The man had learned of her innocence, which could only be proven by exposing the secret of a pair of young lovers, and he had rushed about in search of a solution, resentful of the arrogance of those trying to expose this by forcible means.
推理はな、犯人を作ることでもその過程で罪なき人々の心の真実を踏みにじることでもない。心が大事なんだ。探偵気取るなら心を忘れるんじゃねえ。
And that's something Erica never did. All she cared about was finding someone without an alibi, and just pinning everything on them and twisting the truth around to fit her narrative.
そいつを忘れたら
An intellectual
俺たちは
rapist.
ただの知的蹂躙者だ。
And it's funny, Erica said that like kind of proudly, that she's like, people call me an intellectual rapist.
それを忘れるな。
The Inquisitors couldn't argue back any longer after the man's forceful words. The man's name was Will. Okay. but everyone used to call him by a different title. There we go. I was waiting for, like, the sound. Chief Inquisitor in SSVD, the 8th District Repentance Enforcement Agency of the Great Court of Heaven. Wizard Hunting Wright. Will Wright. I was thinking, too, I was like, this music, to me, it kind of sounds like some Phoenix Wright stuff a little bit. And I love his name is like he's seeking the truth, and his last name is Wright? Are you kidding me? That can't have been a coincidence. Williard H. Wright, a member of the SSVD, the 8th District Repentance Enforcement Agency, the Great Court of Heaven, Inquisitor, ranked Archbishop, first class. Goes by the name Wright of the 20 Wedges, or Wizard Hunting Wright. He was an ace, come on, ace Inquisitor in his youth, and was feared for being both ruthless and merciless in his work. However, at some point, there was a change in his work attitude, and his previously flashy escapades became a thing of his past. His current style is often fickle, alternating between laziness and obsessive bursts of energy regarding mere trifles, but now everyone has given up trying to understand him. He's already submitted his resignation and had it accepted. Only a few days remain before he will lose the name of Wright. Alright, the Witch of Miracles and Miko to the Witch of Theater going. In the 7th game she conducts Beato's funeral, met with defeat in the previous game and came out the loser. She has proclaimed she will tear out the guts of Beato's game to satisfy her irritation, and yet... Alright, I don't think there's anything new about Ushurimiya. Maria inherited the black blood from Kinzo. Alright, Beato. Okay, nothing new there as far as I can see. Alright, so far it looks like that's about it.
これがお前らへの最後の引き継ぎだ。
That is a pretty cool name, Williard H. Wright.
魔術師狩りのライトの名を継ぐなら忘れるな。絶対だ。
Oh, the murder of Beatrice. Okay. Quietly, quietly, the rain fell down. The rain of sadness dripped down the outer walls of the chapel, quietly washing away the dust of the world of the living. The chapel doors were open. For a wedding, only those with invitations would be allowed in. Oh yeah, man, went from like the joyousness of like the end of, you know, episode 5 to like a wedding, and now it's a funeral. However, for a funeral, the doors would be open for all those who remembered the deceased. So this must be a funeral. A figure holding an umbrella approached the chapel. It was Will. Wait, okay, what? So he's just here on the island? Mysterious new person now? Does this bump up the number of people now on the island? Does he replace Erica as the 17th person? Okay. A reception desk had been set up in the entrance to the chapel. And there's Cannon. And so the chapel's open now. So this chapel's been this mysterious thing that's been locked and closed, and it's like this sacred place that no one could seem to enter for the longest time, and then it was kind of forgotten about. As the figure approached, Cannon, who had been sitting at this desk, stood up and welcomed him with a bow.
こちらが受付でございます。弔問の皆様にはご褒美を賜っております。ご記帳をお願いいたします。
悪いな、弔問じゃねえ。待ち合わせだ。
You came to a funeral to meet someone? A dubious expression rose to Cannon's face. Will pulled an envelope from his pocket and showed him the sender's name.
失礼いたしました。どうぞお入りを。
すまねえな。せめてそいつをもらえるか。
ありがとうございます。きっとお喜びになられると思います。
Cannon handed him one of the golden roses being handed out to all the mourners. Will took it, silently bowed his head, and entered the chapel. I guess if he's an Inquisitor, is he here to, like, figure out the mysteries as well? Inside the chapel, several people who appeared to be the family of the deceased were gathered together, and they all seemed to be recalling memories of the departed. Oh, Kinzo. It's been a while since we've had a Beatrice.
Oh, お父様、どうかしっかり控え室の方で少し休みましょう。私が殺したのよ。
Okay, so this is the Beatrice from, what was it, 1960 something?
とんでもない。どうしてローザ様が殺したことになりましょ
う。お父さん、すごい泣きよね。
ベアトリーチェ。
Wow, these guys just mocking him.
絶対お母様が亡くなった時より泣いてるわ。
こら、今はそんなこと言うときちゃうで。
Some sobbed, unable to conceal their tears, and some spoke softly of old memories. They were all remembering the departed in their own ways, it seemed. When Will approached the altar, several people turned around. Of course, none of them knew who Will was. Paying this no mind, Will walked in front of the casket on the altar, which seemed to be buried in golden roses. Inside the casket, there was no corpse. Oh, is he going to take the book out and read it? Instead, as though it lay there in place of a body, there was a single thick book with an extravagant binding. The space all around it was filled with countless golden roses. There were words printed on the book's cover. To my beloved Beatrice, October 5th, 1986.
Miss Beatrice, Mrs. だったら許しな。会ったことはねえ。だが、お悔やみ申し上げるぜ。
I guess it kind of was Mrs. They were married. They did refer to each other as husband and wife, which is still wild to me. He took the rose he had received from the reception area and placed it in the casket. He had absolutely no connection with the woman called Beatrice. However, since he had come to visit a funeral, he had to follow this minimum display of respect for the dead. As part of this, Will prayed for the passage of the departed to the next world.
失礼だが、どちら様かな？私は後宮クラウス、喪主の代行です。こっちは子供のリオン。
Leon?
はじめまして。
What the fuck? What? Okay. What? Okay. So this is a thing now? I am Ushiromiya Leon, the first child of Kraus and Natsui. Jessica is their second child, was given the silver ring of the head successor and will succeed the position of family head upon turning 20. Mild, polite, without any clear faults, except for being too young, this youth is more suitable to become the next head than any other and is adored by Kinzo. What in the world? So she's like the exact opposite of Jessica. What the fuck is going on here?
後宮リオンです。
リオン？誰だお前？
Right? Will's like, what?
理科の理に魚するの魚でリオンと読みます。ちょっと日本人っぽくない名前ですよね。
Well, the Ushiromiyas have a tendency to have weird names, so the name is not the thing I'm surprised about. Will stared at Leon's face, wearing a confused expression. He hadn't seemed to be particularly interested in Kraus, but apparently Leon had drawn some sort of reaction from him. Rather than interest, it was more as though he felt something was out of place. I am flabbergasted right now. It's almost like the ideal child. I mean, well, I feel like Kraus's ideal child would be a son, but still, like, everything that Jessica's not, which is, like, polite and mild-mannered and suited for the whole thing where it's like that she is suited more than any other and that Kinzo adores her. It's almost like she's a Mary Sue or something. Like, what?
奥様がそろそろと。うん、そうか。一同の諸君、ここで賑やかにしては個人もうるさがるだろう。控え室の準備が整ったそうだ。場所を変えようではないか。
When Krauss called out to everyone, they began to move towards the chapel waiting room.
すまん。リオンはしばしお客様のお相手を頼む。
Yeah, what the hell, Leon? We gotta talk to you.
私はみんなを控室に案内する。
はい、父さん。
It looked like a natural conversation with no awkwardness for either father or child.
親子なのか。
そうですが、何か。
後ろ宮クラウスの子供は
Right?
ジェシカのはずだ。
They said second child, so it implies like Jessica exists.
ジェシカは妹です。お呼びする必要はありますか？
いや、ない。
So it's like Will knows the whole story, and it's like she's a weird thing that's not supposed to be here. Apparently, some sort of game is already being played right off the bat. Scratching at his head with an irritated look on his face, Will glanced around.
失礼ですが、あなた様は個人とはどのようなご関係で？
全く何もねえ。迷惑な話さ。
ではあなたはどうしてこの葬儀に？
Since Leon was a fairly mild person, Will's behavior was met with nothing more than a blank expression. A normal person would probably have put on a dubious look long before this. Will scratched his head again and yelled angrily at someone other than Leon.
来たぜ。そろそろ顔を出しやがれ。
The members of the Ushirimiya family had already followed Krauss's instructions and moved to the waiting room. By now, this cold, vast chapel, decorated with gold roses, was empty except for Will and Leon.
よく来たわね。
Burn. What do you got planned, girl?
異端審問官、魔術師狩りのライト。
The girl's voice came suddenly from behind the pair. When Leon turned around in surprise, a girl had appeared out of nowhere and drifted down on top of the altar. She landed softly on the sacred funeral altar as though this was perfectly normal, crushing the golden roses under her shoes. Of course, Leon did not know this girl. Just why on earth were all these people unrelated to the funeral, popping up one after another?
俺はもう引退だ。仕事なら新しいライトに頼みな。
いいえ、あなたに頼みたいのよ。この事件を。送った物語は読んでくれたかしら？
斜め読み程度にはな。
あなたがどなたか存じませんが、そこから降りてください。そこは神聖な祭壇ですよ。
Snapping out of a daze, Leon told the girl to get down off the altar, but the girl ignored this completely. On top of that, Will kept on talking to the girl as though Leon wasn't even there.
リオンとか言ったな。こいつは何者だ？
その子が名乗った通りよ。
Ushirimiya, Leon. There's no case of a person with that name appearing in any of the previous games.
お前の駒なのか？
いいえ、このゲーム版の
Okay,
正し
true and
く
proper
正当な
piece.
駒。登場人物よ。
ゲームマスターはお前だ。なら、お前の駒だろ。
So can they just create new characters out of thin air? It's like fan fiction. It's just like, what if Krauss and Natsui had an older daughter? So I know there's a whole thing about like Natsui was unable to give birth until Jessica. Was Leon some... I don't know, I feel like they wouldn't have kept her hidden if that were the case. Because she wanted a child. I'm so confused about this Leon person.
ベアとの猫箱よりもっと大きな猫箱で閉ざしただけよ。リオンはその中で生まれ得る可能性を持つ。
It's kind of like an Erica. This character may show up or may not show up.
そういうことか。結局、お前の駒というわけだ。
私が置いた駒という意味では正しいわ。
ただし、エリカのような配下の駒ではないということか。
エリカって誰？
Wow.
エリカさん？
理解しようとするな。頭痛になら。
Yeah. That's how I feel right now. Leon didn't have a clue what they were talking about. However, it seemed clear, though. It seemed clear that, though neither of them were familiar, they both knew a lot about the Ushiromiya family.
私にはあなたたちが何の話をしているのか分かりません。とにかくそこのお嬢さん、その祭壇から降りてください。後ろ宮家次期当主としてお願い申し上げます。
Even Leon was finally forced to speak in a raised voice at this girl, who continued to chat while casually standing on the altar. However, the girl ignored this completely. On the other hand, Will did show a reaction.
次期当主はクラウスのはずだ。
父クラウスは私が20歳になるまでの間の当主代行です。
That's gotta sting. That's gotta sting that Kinzo sees this 20-year-old, well, I mean, she's not even 20 yet, this girl as a more suitable successor than he is. I gotta imagine that might spark a little bit of animosity.
20歳になると同時に次期当主である私が当主を継承することになっています。
初耳だ。証拠はあるのか？
It seemed even Leon was starting to get ticked off by now. That calm expression seemed to twitch slightly.
これは次期当主に許されている片翼の鷲の銀の指輪です。これで証拠になりますか？
銀の指輪？金の当主の指輪は何度も登場したが、次期当主の銀の指輪など初耳だ。クラウスもジェシカもそんなものを指に通していた記憶がね
え。嬉しいわ。斜め読みにしてはちゃんと読んでくれてるじゃない。
魔女のよこす文章はどこにろくでもねえことが書いてあるか分かったもんじゃねえ。ましてやそれが元老院の大魔女とくりゃな。
あなた方は一体何者なんですか？失礼だが私には何の話をしているのかさっぱりわかりません。個人への喧嘩がお済みでしたらどうぞお引き取りを。どうやらあなた方は当家がおもてなしすべき方々ではないようです。
Leon finally ran out of patience. These were the strictest words this gentle kid could unleash. However, Will and the girl seemed not to care at all.
俺も来たくて来たわけじゃね
え。時間の無駄だから話を進めるわ。ライト、このゲームに挑みなさい。ゲームマスター、ベルンカステルの名においてこのゲームにあなたを招待してあげるわ。
お断りだ。
どうして？
俺はもう引退する身だ。推理もミステリーも知ったことか。
何をして余生を過ごすというの？魔術師狩りのライトが魔女狩りをやめて。
狐狩りでも潮干狩りでもするさ。俺がここに来たのはあんたと余生を語るためじゃねえ。
断るために来たと。
ご検察いただき光栄の極みと知りたまいなりや。
なら好きにしたらいいわ。どこへでも行けばいい。ただしここから立ち去れればの話だけれど。
Oh, is he trapped in here? It's like a closed off space, right? So it's like if you want, you have to solve the mystery if you want to leave.
それで条件と報酬は？
In truth, Will had already given up from the beginning. He knew he was incapable of refusing an invitation from the great Lady Berncastel.
ベアトリーチェを殺したのは誰か。それが私のゲーム。
Okay, who killed Beatrice? Interesting. Usually it's who, like, how did Beatrice kill, and now it's the other way around.
報酬は私に対するその無礼な口の利き方を許すことと、この礼拝堂を立ち去る権利。
退屈を愛さない魔女は存在な言葉を愛すると聞いたぜ。
それは1000年を生き飽きたババア魔女の話よ。私はまだまだ若いからあんたみたいな言葉遣いの男をどんな過酷な運命に閉じ込めてやろうかと無双することを愛するの。
それだ。敵は誰だ？
いないわ。妨害などするわけもない。このゲームをあなたが美しく詰めるところをただ私たちは感激したいだけ。
This will be an interesting one. So it's like Badler. I don't know if Badler is going to be in this game except as a piece, and Beatrice is not in here. Now it's Byrne and this Will guy and Leon.
仲間も用意する。それが
Oh,
そのリオンよ。
okay. After hearing that name spoken out of the blue, Leon frowned once more. Apparently, they were moving things along without Leon's knowledge or understanding, which was truly irritating.
リオンは後ろ宮家の人間。後ろ宮家の誰とも面識のないあなたには心強い味方となってくれるでしょう。
何の話か分かりかねますが、事情のわからない話には何もご協力はできかねますよ。
だそうだ。頼もしい限りだな。
私と我が主を楽しませなさい。魔術師狩りのライト、アウアウは行儀のいい感激者だけれど、私は退屈するとポップコーンを投げつけたりしちゃうかもね。
Is that her nickname for Aurora? Is Ow Ow? Will scratched at his head with a displeased look on his face. He wasn't at all interested in getting involved, but by now he realized that he couldn't disobey Bernkestel's orders. Then he approached the casket and pointed at its rose-filled insides.
ベアトリーチェ殺人事件の依頼とのことだが、バンダイン20足、第7足。
Alright, let's get into this.
死体なき事件であることを禁ず。
悪魔の証明ね。棺にないだけじゃない。死体が存在しないことをあなたが証明できない限り、これはミステリーよ。
第1足、手がかりすべての揃わぬ事件を禁ず。
安心なさい。すべてはここに揃っている。
There was no change to Will's unsatisfied expression, but he seemed to have understood that everything was at least in order. And the moment he was summoned by an uninhibited, fickle, cruel great witch of the Senate, a mere inquisitor like him was bound to be treated as no more than an underling. He had never possessed a way to refuse her.
この空っぽの棺の主を殺したのは誰か。引き受けてやら。ただし、俺の流儀でやらせてもらう。
ご自由に。
まず最初にすることは、お前に現状を理解させることだな。
それをお願いできると、私もとても助かります。
Leon's face was a goulash of displeased expressions, seemingly nonplussed, angry, and confused all at the same time.
キナ、実際に見た方が早い。
いいでしょう。音もしましょうとも。
Will signaled with his chin for Leon to follow him and spun around. After snorting once in an unsatisfied manner, Leon followed Will while looking deeply skeptical of the latter's ability to explain any of this in a way that would make sense. As she watched the pair leave the chapel, Bernkestel sneered silently at them with a cold smile on her face.
尊厳なる感激と戯曲と傍観の魔女。フェザリーヌなんとかアウアウローラの巫女にして奇跡の魔女。ベルンカステルの名においてこのゲームの開始を宣言するわ。物語のタイトルは黄金の魔女のレクイエム。ベアとの葬儀にふさわしい物語を紡ぎなさい。さて、どんな腹渡を引きずり出してくれるやら。
After watching the pair leave the chapel, Bernkestel's form evaporated into the empty air just as she had arrived. All that remained was her unpleasant cackling. Outside, it was still raining. When Kenan saw the guest and the head successor approaching the reception desk, he bowed deeply.
ご苦労様です。休んで結構ですので、外してもらえますか。
カノンです。かしこまりました。
Wait, she doesn't know Kenan's name? Interesting, considering that she's the, I imagine she lives here. Kenan bowed deeply, then disappeared.
下々の名前まではいちいち覚えていないってか。
当家には 若い使用人が大勢出入
Oh,
りしてお
wow.
り、入れ替わりも頻繁ですので。
Meanwhile, Jessica is very different. Like, she basically becomes friends with everybody. And she sees them, like, on a... I guess, you know, if she's fitting... If Kinzo finds her a fitting head of the successor, he, you know... I guess it kind of makes sense for her to basically be like, I don't bother myself with the, you know, with the lessers. I don't bother to remember their names. They're not worthy of it.
さて、何をどう理解させてくれるのですか？あなた様は何者で、当家にどのようなご用がおありで？もちろん納得させてくれなくて構いません。このままお帰りいただければいいだけですので。
もう帰れねえのさ。俺も誰もな。
もういい加減にしてくれませんか？そのよくわからない煙に巻くような喋り方は、私にだって我慢の限界というものがあります。私では見送りにならないというなら、源氏と合田にお送りさせてもいいのですよ。
騒ぐな。こいつを見てろ。
見ればわかります。葬儀用のバラです。まさか手品でも見せてくれるおつもりで？
Will took one of the flower offerings, then showed it to Leon, as if to demonstrate that there were no mechanisms or tricks. Then he slowly lifted it upwards.
見てろ。
ええ、見てますよ。鳩でも飛び出すんですか？それともクラッカーと万国旗にでも？
Will threw the rose. Anyone would have expected it to fly in an arc and land in some puddle amid the wind and rain. The betrayal of that expectation struck Leon dumb. Initially, the rose Will had thrown had certainly flown into an arc. It swished rapidly through the air. However, as soon as it was about to pass from the shade of the eaves into the rain, it stopped right in midair, as though the air surrounding it had turned into syrup. That wasn't all. As it hung in midair, the rose's beautiful golden petals began to darken one after another, and it became a black husk like burnt charcoal. And even after all this happened, it remained suspended there in the air.
これは何の手品ですか？
動くな。
Leon had moved closer to try and touch the remains of the rose, which still hung in the air. Will had roughly blocked the way with his arm. It was as though he was telling Leon that leaving this place meant certain death.
この礼拝堂がかけらから切り離された。この礼拝堂は今濃縮された時間の渦に閉じ込められている。
それはどういうことですか？
めんどくせえからはしょる。つまりさっきの魔女のゲームに付き合わねえ限り誰もここから出られね
え。なんですって？もう葬儀は終わっています。お屋敷やゲストハウスに戻りたい方々もいらっしゃるでしょう。こんなことは困ります。
恨むならあの魔女を恨め。俺も帰れなくていい迷惑だ。
あの少女はあなたの友人でしょ。この変なのをやめさせてください。
あいつは今頃ポップコーンのバケツでも抱いて観客席だろう。呼んだって現れね
え。わけがわからない。
That short sentence described all of Leon's feelings at that moment. And mine, too. However, Leon had seen the rose Will threw wither in an instant in the rainy darkness. Leon tried doing the same thing with another rose, but the effect was exactly the same. No one would want to use their own body to test this fearsome something that could make roses crumble instantly.
ここから解放される方法はただ一つ。ベルンカステルのゲームに付き合うことだけだ。
ベアトリーチェを殺したのは誰か？
そいつを調べろと仰せだ。お前がそれを聞かせてくれりゃ話は早い。気まぐれ魔女は大満足。お前は厄介払いができて、俺は帰ってダイアナとデートだ。あまり待たせすぎるとまたソファーをズタボロにしちまわ。
ベアトリーチェを殺したのは誰かなんて葬儀に押しかけて遺族に聞くこととは思えませんね。
遺族に聞き込みはミステリーの基本だ。諦め。ベアトリーチェってのは当主金蔵の愛人だってのは分かっている。
あなたは本当に不思議な人だ。どうしてそこまで当家のことをご存知なのですか？やはり 当家に縁のある方なのでは。
Will knew so much about the Ushiromiya family because Bernkastel had shown him all the fragments so far. Of course, he had no sort of connection with the Ushiromiya family himself. The very plane of his existence was on a different level.
しかし、ベアトリーチェはだいぶ昔に死んでいる。現地の証言では、屋敷の竣工前に死んでるってことに。
This is the mystery here, is like, what do they mean by Beatrice? Which one? The old Beatrice? The human Beatrice? The personification of Beatrice now?
死んだ理由は明らかじゃねえ。
It's true, we don't really know too much about the past. Like, there's been references and hints about their relationship and stuff, but nothing really concrete or, like, nothing... They didn't really get too much into the past, which... Oh, that... I didn't even think about that, but I'm like, I definitely would be interested to know more about, like, Kinzo and Beatrice, like, how they met, their relationship.
正直なところ、殺されたってのは初耳だ。
Right? Killed. I didn't even think about that. Like, you just assumed maybe she died of old age or something happened to her, but not a murder.
聞かせてくれ。
私の名は後宮リオンと申します。
ウィラードだ。ウィルでいい。
For the first time, Will introduced himself. The mutual introduction was finally completed, and Leon was finally able to talk with him on even footing. However, Leon took a deep breath and looked up at the sky, wearing a vague smile.
ウィルさん。
ウィルでいい。俺もリオンと呼ぶ。
ウィル、正直なところ、私にもベアトリーチェという人物のことがよくわからないのです。
なるほど。一応ゲームにはなるわけか。
If only Leon could have told him everything, revealing the truth without any effort from Will, it would be the shortest episode ever. Apparently things wouldn't be so easy after all. Well, that wouldn't be of any fun, would it?
ベアトリーチェの名と姿を後宮家に出入りするもので知らぬものはないでしょう。
大広間にでかい肖像画が飾ってあるからな。肖像画の掲示は1984年の4月だ。
本当にあなたはどうしてそんなことまで。やれやれ、それを疑問に思うのももうやめることにします。どうせあなたにまた煙に巻かれるんですからね。
Leon was the successor to the head and lived with the main family. Kinzo frequently chose to spoke with his successor. Because of this, Leon must have been used to chatting with people who were moody or hard to follow. Deciding once and for all that getting hung up on trivialities would be nothing but a waste of time, Leon was able to converse naturally with this unknown man called Will, as though the two of them had been friends for a long time.
誰もがベアトリーチェを知っている。なのに誰も知らねえ。会ったことがあるのは当主金蔵だけだ。
Well, Genji has met her before, has seen her. Kumasawa maybe too?
当主様は今日は特にお心が不安定でいらっしゃいます。タイミングを見て私が紹介しますので、なるべく慎んだ態度でお願いしますよ、ビルさん。
話が早えな。てっきりもっと非協力的かと思ってたぜ。
長年当主様のお相手をしていると、大抵の理不尽な事態とはある種の諦めを持って接することができるようになりますので。
Bernkastel had set up a barrier, cutting the chapel off from the rest of the world. To destroy that, they'd have to find out who killed Beatrice. For Leon, who had been made to go along with Kinzo on many an occasion, understanding this much was all that was necessary. The Ushiromiya family members were relaxing here and there around the waiting room. A light buffet-style meal had been set up, but it looked a bit stale and not particularly appetizing. Even so, those voracious kids seemed to find it intensely appealing. The cousins had set up camp around it, with Mari at the center. I just remember being a kid and, like, me and my cousins, like when we had to go to funerals, like we didn't really understand much of what was going on, but we were interested in like, all right, what's the food sitch like? The adult siblings had also formed a group in a different corner. Perhaps because of Kinzo's absence, everyone seemed a little bit more relaxed.
リオン、どこへ行っていたのですか？そちらの方は。
母さん、お客様のお相手をしていました。ウィル、こちらは母の夏日です。
紹介はいらねえ。ただ話を聞かせてくれりゃいい。
え、何かおっしゃいまして？
いいえ、何も。こちらはウィルさん、個人に縁ある方だそうです。
With a smile, Leon casually smoothed over Will's words.
彼はベアトリーチェのことをより詳しく知りたがっています。母さんはベアトリーチェについては何かご存知ですか？
リオン、個人は当主様のかつての恩人です。そしてそれ以上でもそれ以下の関係でもありません。この葬儀は当主様が個人への生前の恩を報いるためのお式。そう聞いていますし、それ以外のことは何もありません。
ありがとう、母さん。ウィル、母が知っていることはこれだけです。
Natsue was very resistant to the scandalous rumors that Kinzo, a man she greatly respected, had once had a concubine called Beatrice. However, she also understood the scandal was probably the truth. Picking up that Natsue was in a bad mood and didn't want to talk about this anymore, Leon brought an end to the conversation before Will could say something rude again.
ウィル、この礼拝堂は当家の敷地内です。
当家のルールに従えってか。
当家の客人にふさわしい口調に改めていただく。話はすべて私を返していただく。その2つを守っていただけるようお願いいたします。
努力すら。
ベルーンカステルとかいう魔女に巻き込まれて大いに迷惑です。ですから私も協力はします。しかしあなたと私の立場は対等ですので、それをお忘れになりませんよ。
育ちがいいだけのお坊ちゃんだと思ってたらなかなか言うな。
これでも後ろ宮家の未来を背負う覚悟はありますので。
わかった。仲良く事件を解決しようぜ。
Watson.
ワトソン君。
I wonder if the Williard rite, if that is that like a reference to, because I know people have said, like have told me that the author definitely has like had hits references to Phoenix Wright, you know, like the pointing thing with Badler and stuff like that. But I'm wondering, like, Williard H. Wright, is that a reference to like a is that a reference to like a mystery author, or, you know, a person that actually existed? I kind of want to look into it, but I'd also be a little bit afraid of spoiling something, so maybe I'll hold off on that.
ご協力いただけて嬉しいです。愛病のダイアナを待たせないためにも。餌の時間は大丈夫ですか？
Wait a minute, so she knows that Diana is a cat? Because he said he has a date with Diana? Or is she just mocking him?
今日は山盛りにしてある。
Wait, what? How does she know that that Diana's a cat? Okay.
多少は大丈夫だ。よくダイアナが猫のことだと分かったな。
Okay, I was just like, maybe she's like, oh, no, no woman would actually want to go on a date with you. So I came to that conclusion. I guess Leon is pretty perceptive.
ソファーを引っかえて待ちわびる女性というのは少々個性的が過ぎると思いましたので。
I figured that was just a figure of speech about scratching up the couch.
それで、まずは誰に話を？
誰でもいい。全員だ。あそこにいるのはクラウスの兄弟たちか。
向かって右からエヴァおばさん、秀吉。あちらがルドルフおじさん、キリエ。
Sorry, I don't mean to skip ahead.
後ろ宮ローザか。少女時代に森をさまよい、隠し館でベアトリーチェと名乗る女に遭遇した経験を持つ。
Alright, so are we going to interrogate Rosa about this? This was mentioned in a previous chapter before, but it hasn't been talked about in a while. And then Rosa said that thing about how she's the one who killed Beatrice, so obviously Will's going to be like, okay, that's somebody worth talking to.
驚くまいとは思っていますが、本当にあなたは何でも知っている。お
前もその話は知っているのか？
今日 彼女がそう話しているのを漏れ聞きました。辛そうな話でしたので聞こえないふりをしましたが。
優等生だな。紹介してくれ。話を聞きたい。
辛そうな話でしたので聞こえないふりをした優等生の私に。
Even this outrageous arrogance is nothing compared to Kinzo. After muttering this several times mentally, Leon shrugged and nodded at will.
あら、次期当主様じゃない。そちらの方は？
ああ、エヴァおばさん。
Oh, I'm sure Ava's like, ooh, she's probably burning up inside at the whole thing about like that a woman is going to be the successor, but it's not her. You know, she tried so hard to be like everything that Kinzo wanted, to be like, I can prove, you know, like a woman can be the successor. And then this just kid shows up and ends up being the one that Kinzo's going to give everything to.
こちらはウィルさん。個人のために献花に訪れてくれました。
んなことはどうでもいい。ベアトリーチェについて知って。
個人と後宮家の関わりについてお話を聞きたいと言っています。
Leon spoke with a bright smile while pinching Will's butt. Will silently protested as though saying, even for a gag, that hurts. But Leon just played dumb and smiled at Ava like a model student.
後宮家との関わりって言ってもね。
後宮家とちゅうよりお父さんとの関わりっちゅうべきやろな。
正直に言えばいいのさ。親父の愛人ってな。
愛人なんて言うとまた夏日姉さんに怒られるわよ。恩人でしょ。
そうやな。
こんな具合ですが。
ローザ以外には興味ね。
ローザおばさんは確かベアトリーチェに会ったことがあると。
This whole time, Rosa had been hanging her head. Leon's words made her shoulders quiver.
今日になって急に言い出したのよ。ちょっと信じがたい話だわ。
本当なのよ。ベアトリーチェは私が殺したの。
事件解決。
I was just about to say, it's like, well, my work here is done. That was easy.
早計です。
Rosa broke down crying and laid her head on the table. Kirie and Hideyoshi tried to console her.
六軒島はうっそうとした森に包まれてる。私たちが知っているのはそのうちのごくわずか。屋敷とバラ庭園、そして船着き場に向かうちょっとした林道だけ。
誰も知らない広大な森のどこかに親父が隠れ屋敷を作って愛人を住まわせてるんじゃないかって話は相当の昔からあったんだ。
ローザさんは多分その隠れ屋敷に偶然たどり着いてしまったっちゅうんやろな。
しかしどうしてローザおばさんはベアトリーチェを殺したなどと。
私が連れ出さなければ彼女は死なずに済んだわ。彼女は無垢なひよこのような人だったわ。
Hey, Chick Beato, right? Chick Beato. That was something I brought up in my theory video, was like, I don't... the implications that if that Chick Beato was the Chick Beato from the last game being kept up in that mansion with Kinzo, knowing like the age, because like, you know, I'm assuming that the OG Beatrice must have died a long time ago, because there's no way that this young Beatrice was the same Beatrice that Kinzo had the affair with, or who met, like, when did he meet her? Like, all the way back in the war? So that would have been, like, what, the 30s? 40s?
私が連れ出したから素直についてきた。
This certainly does sound like the Beato from the last episode, or the last chapter, I should say.
何も疑わずに私の後をぴったりついてきて、私があんな足場の悪いところを歩かせてしまったから。
お前は崖から足を踏み外すことを期待してそこを歩かせたのか。
そんなつもりはなかった。 ただ海が見たいと思って。歩きづらそうだったから下に降りれば少しは楽になるかなと思って。
それは殺したとは言わねえ。事故だ。
私が連れ出さなければ会わなかった事故よ。私のせいなの。それに私は血まみれの彼女を見捨てて逃げ帰ってしまった。
あんたのせいじゃねえ。
So there's the other thing too, is like Rosa said this happened in the 60s when she was a kid, but I'm assuming, like, when is this? I'm assuming this is happening in the 80s, because Leon is, well, I mean, Leon is a character that didn't exist until this episode, but I mean, the fact that Jessica was born, I'm a little confused about the time. Like, it hurts my head already, because like, if this was the 80s, and the Beatrice that she's talking about would have died sometime in the 60s. Yet they're having the funeral for her now?
ベアトリーチェは海を一度も見たことがなかった。それをあんたが初めて見せたんだ。つい浮かれて一歩踏み外しちまったんだろ
う。どうしてあなたはそれを？
ベアトリーチェはあんたに感謝こそすれ恨んでるわけもねえ。
かしら。本当にそうなのかしら。
柵の外の世界へ出たいと懇願したのは彼女だろう。お前はその夢を束の間だけ叶えたんだ。
I kind of want to go back, like knowing about the Chick Beto thing, I want to go back and read this part again. I can't remember which chapter this was. Was this chapter 2, 3? 4? I can't quite remember, but like I bet there'd be so many clues or references, like knowing what I know now about who this Beatrice seems to be.
俺がベアトリーチェならその束の間の時間をお前に感謝するだろうよ。なのにお前がいつまでも苦しんでると知ったら申し訳なく思うだろう。ベアトリーチェはお前に感謝してる。海が青いってことを教えてくれたあんたをな。
Wait a minute, isn't that like a thing that Canon said to Shannon? Where it's like thought that the ocean was gray, but now I know that it's blue?
それは本当に。
俺が保証する。
Will made that statement openly and boldly. No one could tell how Rosa took those words. However, they had apparently been enough to remind her to take a handkerchief out of her pocket and wipe her eyes.
ありがとう。
その言葉はベアトリーチェが今もあんたにささやいてる。
ありがとう。
Rosa wiped her eyes with the handkerchief one more time and hung her head. It no longer looked like a fit of sobbing, but more as though she was speaking with the Beatrice of that day within her heart. One last time.
よくもそんな無責任な言葉を堂々とかけられるものです。
責任がなけりゃ女を慰めることもできねえのか。
多少は見直しました。
I was thinking, like, he seems a little rough around the edges, but he seems to have a good heart. And it's like what that made at the beginning, where it's like he came to defend the innocent. For how many years had this tormented Rosa? Now, for the first time, Rosa would probably be able to face that innocently smiling Beatrice, who had seen the ocean for the first time in her life. She was the only one who could forgive Rosa. Now the two of them could finally speak together. Is she gonna show up here?
どなたか存じないけれど。
I thought maybe even as like a ghost, as representation. See little Chick Beto again?
彼女は私を許してくれるかしら。
あんたは20年近くもそれを悩んだ。
Yeah, 20 years. Nearly 20 years.
長すぎだ。彼女はもう勘弁しろと言ってだ。
そうですよ、ローザおばさん。あなたが悲しめば悲しむほど、きっとベアトリーチェも悲しむでしょう。
あなたまでありがと 私には私が許されるかどうかわからないけれど、彼女が許してくれるかどうか胸の中で問いかけてみることにするわ。二人ともありがとう。恥ずかしいところを見せてごめんなさい。
綺麗事を言った下の根も乾かねえうちで恐縮だが、聞かせてほしい、当時のことを。
ウィルさん、
ありがとう。大丈夫よ。話すわ。誰にも話さずにずっと隠してきたことが私の一番の罪なのかもしれないから。
お前がベアトリーチェに出会ったのは。
Upon hearing this question, Rosa closed her eyes lightly, reaching back to a past she didn't want to remember. All right, let's see if we can get some more information from this and figure out what's going on here.
20年ほど昔の話よ。20... いえ。
Wait a minute.
19年前。
19 or 18 years ago.
18年前かもしれない。
Yeah, all right. So that was, I mean, I think we knew about that because there's a whole thing. When did this happen? So it was 66? And then, no, 60. So 19, or I'm trying to remember because so it's, this is taking place in 1986. Okay, so this isn't something that I already knew this.
ごめんなさい。
This is important though. This feels very important.
長いこと無理に忘れようとしてきたものだから、そこは少し忘れかけてるわ。
Because then there's a whole thing about the baby from 19 years ago, right? This is gonna come up. Like who that baby? The timelines match up. The baby, Beatrice.
1967のはずだ。
Yeah, okay, so 18 years ago. That's right. Or 19 years ago. What am I saying? Bleh, 19 years ago. Rodove had guaranteed that with the red truth in the third game. I know math, guys.
多分1967年頃だわ。
Because there's a whole thing where like, oh, was Badler the baby from 19 years ago? But then you gotta think about like, okay, who could it possibly be? And I theorized that given the age, it could have been Badler, but I don't think it was. Even though his voice was used for the baby from 19 years ago. Implying that it was a boy. So then I was thinking, okay, well maybe it's... Because I'm assuming Natsu would know the sex of the baby. So if it was a man's voice. But then that I don't know. This part still gets me. I'm still so confused about this.
あの時の出来事は写真のように鮮明に覚えてる。忘れられないの。
辛かったら無理に話す必要はありませんので。
And then Will's like, no, shut up. She's got to tell us.
写真のように鮮明に頼む。痛えぞリオン。
何のことやら？
家庭教師が私の内緒話を母に告げ口していたのにショックを受けて、あの日私は自暴自棄になって森の奥へ奥へどこまでもかけていったの。
This tale had been told in a previous fragment. Back when Rosa was just a kid, she had gone deep into the forest, found a hidden mansion, and met with a mysterious woman who called herself Beatrice.
ほんの少し分け入ることすら難しいあの深い森を。
自分でも驚くわ。あんなうっそうとした森をよくもあんなに深くまでたくさんの梢や鋭い葉っぱで苛まれたわ。でもあの日の私は気にしなかった。森の奥へ消えることで永遠に消えてしまいたかったし、もし本当に森の奥に魔女の館があったなら、自分を幸せの国へ連れて行ってくれるか、カエルにでも変えて森の住人に変えてくれると思っていたから。
そしてあんたは隠し屋敷クアドリアンにたどり着き、そこでベアトリーチェと名乗る女と出会う。
ええ、あったわ。
そのベアトリーチェは肖像画のベアトリーチェと同一人物だったか？
Now here's the big... I mean, she looked like her, but I don't know. I mean, the picture only went up in the main hall a few years before this takes place. And he met Beatrice. They said Kinzo met Beatrice during the war, so there's no way that she was that young in 1960s. I don't know.
同一人物だったわ。
Can you say that in red, please?
美しい青い瞳、黄金の髪、黒いドレス、まさにあの肖像画通りの人物だった。私はあの肖像画をお父様が掲げた時、
It was probably like because she had died, it was in memorial of her,
私
right?
が忘れようとあがいた20年の月日はお父様にとっても同じ。あるいはそれ以上の日々であったと気づき、さらなる罪に怯えたわ。
So, okay. Because she looks quite young in that picture, too. So, like, alright, so assuming that he met Beatrice during the war, she helped him out, but she's so young here. My thought is, like, did he have a baby with the OG Beatrice when he was younger? Like, from back in, like, the 30s or 40s or whatever. And then maybe that Beatrice died, the OG Beatrice. I was going to call her as the OG Beatrice died. So maybe that Beatrice is like his daughter with Beatrice. So he kept his daughter locked up in Kuadorian and had her dress up like her mother, look just like her mother. That's really fucking creepy, if that's the case. Especially considering that, like, it's implied that he had, like, a romantic relationship with this Beatrice? So does that mean that he had an incestual relationship with his daughter that he also called Beatrice, that he had with the original Beatrice from way back in the day? Ew.
それ、本当にローザさんの出会っ
Right?
たベアトリーチェのことなのかしら。
Is this where Kiri's gonna be like, this doesn't match up because, like, he met her a long time ago and she seems quite young. Immediately, Kiri spoke the question Will had been thinking of. Hey, I'm glad that I'm, like, thinking the same way as these guys. Like, this doesn't seem to match up. It would be too rash to assume that the Beatrice Kinzo met was the same person as the one Rosa met. The time and generation were different for each, right? Right? Exactly.
ベアトリーチェってのは戦後すぐの頃、親父に黄金を貸し付けた勇敢マダムのはずだぜ。
お父さんはベアトリーチェの黄金を元手に後宮家を復興して大金持ちになり、そして六軒島を買い取り移住するんや。ローザさんが出会ったのは、
Right?
それから10年以上も先の話になるで。
10トンの黄金を自在にできるご婦人が小娘程度のわけはない。ましてやローザが会った頃にはそれからさらに10年以上が経過してる。ローザ、あんたの会ったベアトリーチェは
Okay.
いくつくらい
It seems very obvious when you break it down, doesn't it?
当時の私よりは年上に見えたけれど、それでも多分成人したかどうかという年に見えたわ。そう、まさに肖像画のベアトリーチェくらいの年齢よ。
中年、あるいは壮年に見えたか？
大人か子供かって言われたら明らかに子供に近い年齢だったわ。中年なんてとんでもない。
だからそれじゃおかしいのよ。あんたの会ったベアトリーチェとお父様に黄金を
I mean,
与
they're
えた
spelling it.
ベアトリーチェ。
They're spelling it right out, aren't they?
年齢が合わないのよ。
つまり別人ということだ。
よく似た同じ名前の別人。
Oh damn! When they said that this game was going to like just give you answers, are they actually going to give us answers? Are they going to straight up be like, yeah, she's probably the daughter of Kinzo and the original Beatrice.
娘かもしれんな。
They straight up are saying it. Oh my god!
親子ならよく似とったに違いない。
愛人の娘。
That he had locked up and implied to have a sexual relationship. I might be looking too much into it, but I don't know. The whole thing about that chick Beato saying that she was, oh my god.
年齢的辻褄は合うな。
So this is where I can refer them to. They're going to say OG and Beatrice too, or chick Beato.
なるほど。
Okay, so wow, we might actually, this might be the episode where things are laid out pretty clearly.
つまりベアトリーチェと呼ばれる人物は2人いるわけですね。
Kinzo secretly raised his mistress's child in a hidden mansion. That would make logical sense. Everyone nodded, agreeing. However, Will's expression was slightly unsatisfied and he scratched at his head.
どうやらこの葬儀は隠したがゆえに弔うことができなかった
Okay.
2人のベアトリーチェのためのようですね。
ローザ、思い出したくねえだろうが、事故の時の話を頼む。ベアトリーチェが転落した時、まだ息はあったのか？
Yeah, we never got the, like, confirmation that she actually died, right?
いいえ
No.
目を大きく見開いていた。
Okay.
頭から真っ逆さまに落ちて岩浜の岩の鋭い角に頭をぶつけて、それもあの高さから頭部は陥没して裂けてたわ。
Ew.
美しい黄金の髪がみるみるうちに赤黒く溢れるうちに染められて、
一目見て死んだと確信できる外傷だったのか？
ええ、割れた頭の中身を見たわ。それも握り拳次第に陥没して、あれを見て生きててほしいなんていくらなんでも虫が良すぎるわ。
ウィル、それ以上聞く必要はありますか？
事故時はもういい。それからあんたはどうした？
一目散に駆け出したわ。誰かを呼びに行くためなんて綺麗事でさえない。その場から一刻も早く逃げ出したかったの。錯乱状態になりながら、涙と荒い息でめちゃくちゃになりながら、でそしたらいつの間にか見知ったライオンの彫像に出くわしたわ。
ああ、礼拝堂の前の？
いいえ、裏のよ。とにかく私は屋敷に帰り着いた。誰にも話せない。話したくない。私は夜まで黙っていたわ。ひどい話よ。急いで誰かに話し、救急箱を持って戻っていたら、
I mean,
彼女を助けられたかもしれない
Rosa,
のに。
you said it yourself. I mean, her head was caved in. I don't think a first aid kit would have helped.
頭蓋骨陥没を
Yeah, exactly.
救急箱の何で救えたってんだ。お前が殺したわけじゃない。もう気にするな。
それでローザおばさんはどうしたんですか？
ベッドで何度も寝返りを打ったわ。眠れなかった。深夜にこっそり源氏さんに電話して打ち明けたわ。
Oh, okay, so Genji knew.
源氏は何と言った？
I don't know if this is new information or this has already been like brought up before.
自分に全て任せ、誰にもこのことは言わないようにと。後日きっとお父様に呼び出されてひどく叱られるだろうと数日の間怯えたわ。でもそれはなかった。源氏さんはいつものようにしずしずと仕事をする日々。
Genji's a real one.
お父様は相変わらずの書斎ごもりで何もわからない。
少なくとも私たちの耳には入らなかっ
I
たわ。
wonder how often Kinzo went to go visit Beatrice? Like, how long did it take before he realized that she wasn't there anymore? And did Genji go down and, like, get rid of the body? Did Kinzo just assume Beatrice had escaped? So many questions still.
源氏さんがうまく処理してくれたんだろうな。
表沙汰にできない子だったでしょうからね。
隠し子っちゅうたって血を分けた子供や。その葬式もまともにあげられんかったんなら、そらお父さんも心苦しかったやろな。
それがこの葬儀というわけですね。
それから？
私が知っている話は、
俺が知っている話もそれで全てだ。
これ以上私は何も隠していない。全て話した。誓うわ。
Will scratched at his head, letting his gaze wander. It had taken Rosa a lot of determination to make this confession, but it was nothing particularly special for Will. It had been little more than a review of information he already knew.
ありがとう、ローザおばさん。十分ですか、ウィル。これで話は。
十分だ。おさらいになった。
Wow, a nice review. Rosa's like, I spilled my guts to you, and you're just like, you already knew all this? To Will, Rosa's memories gave only information that was already known. I didn't know if the Genji thing was already, like, had been brought up, that Rosa had told Genji. I didn't remember that. This was the first time he'd heard about, this was the first time he'd heard all that about her running back to the mansion after Beatrice fell to her death. But none of it was particularly surprising. Apparently, Rosa really didn't know any more than this. If he wanted to learn something beyond the fragments given to him by Bernkastel, he would need to find new testimony.
Leon, Kinzo ni.
Oh shit, we're gonna talk to Kinzo. Are we actually gonna get some backstory about Kinzo and Beatrice? I wonder, like, Leon with the red hair, he kind of looks like Badler. Badler hasn't been seen yet in this game board. Like, we've seen some of the cousins. Haven't seen Jessica either. We've only seen George and Maria, from what I've seen. So, is he kind of like the substitute for Badler? Like a cooler detective version of Badler.
あなたはどちらへ？
頭を冷やして整理する。ついてくんな。
それは失礼。どうぞごゆっくり。
After giving an elegant bow, Leon made a face, tongue sticking out. Unless Will had eyes on the back of his head, he couldn't have seen this last bit. Will returned to the chapel by himself. The cold air and the monotonous sound of the rain were comforting.
どう？ゲームは。
And he had come here for a little peace and quiet. No sooner had he let out a sigh of relief than that voice rang out.
それは俺が聞くことだ。
It was as though she had been sitting there all along. Bernkastel appeared on top of the altar once more. Apparently, she found this particular altar extremely comfortable.
バトラは無能で、私を何度もイラつかせたわ。それに比べ、あなたは有能だから。
Maybe he is.
見ていて安心できる。
Maybe like Leon being, I don't know, like a more competent Jessica. Maybe he's like the more competent version of Badler.
後ろ宮バトラの時と違い、誰の妨害もねえ。気楽なもんさ。
もうそういうゲームは終わったの。物語は二度楽しめるわ。一度目はめでて、二度目は腹を引き裂いて。
Right? This is tearing out the guts. This is like getting to the meat and potatoes of it. Right? Like exactly how it happens.
俺を肉屋だと思ってやがる。
どう？ベアトリーチェ殺しの犯人はわかりそう？
ローザの告白は過去のかけらですでに知ってる。真新しい情報はない。進展はゼロだ。
And also, which Beatrice are we talking about? Are we talking about the Beatrice 2? Are we talking about the Beatrice from the game of 1986? Because there's multiple Beatrices, as we know.
これ以上の展開はね。まさか俺が金蔵を口説き落として真相を告白させるってのもゲームに含まれてるとは言い出さねえだろうな。
そんなの退屈で死んでしまうわ。真実を語らぬ金蔵は、それ自体が城に守られたキングだけれど、あなたのゲームの障壁になってしまっては面白くない。
拷問はやらねえ。俺の流儀だ。
わかってる。ゲームマスターとしてあんたに力を与えるわ。金蔵から真実を得られるように。
Ooh, okay. Still wearing shoes, Bernkastel stepped into the casket, picked up one of the flowers that had been set as offerings, and blew hard as though scattering fluff from a dandelion. When she did, a single petal broke off and drifted down towards Will, no longer gold, but with the shine of a transparent crystal.
探偵権限か。
Ah, so he's the new detective. I guess it makes sense. He is a part of the Inquisition.
何？違うわ。
No.
それは観覧席への招待状よ。
感激者権限か。
I just love just the shade thrown at Erica.
それを元老院の許可なく与えることは禁じられてるはず。
私のゲーム版で誰が禁止すると？
Though the crystal flower petal danced in the wind, it wouldn't fly away anywhere until Will accepted it. Will remembered how useless it was to argue with witches, and he snatched it up. When he did, the petal flashed brightly for an instant, melted into Will's palm, and disappeared.
せいぜい私を楽しませなさい。ついでにあなたも楽しむといい。このベアトリーチェのゲーム版の腹渡がどうなってるか。あんたも興味があるでしょ？
ねえよ。
After Will's rude answer, Bernkastel vanished into thin air, leaving behind an obnoxious laugh. After clicking his tongue, Will turned around, visibly annoyed. When he did, it felt as though his gaze crossed that of a shadowy figure standing by the door in front of him that led outside.
誰だ?
Shannon, hello.
失礼しました。声が聞こえたので、どちら様かと思いまして。
Is he about to interrogate Shannon? I want to know about you, Shannon. You're sus.
今度はお前が受付をしているのか?
Right? Once again, Canon and Shannon, not together.
はい、カノン君と交代で
Of course you have.
受付を担当させていただいております。
おう。カノンは?
先ほど、リオン様に休みを取るようご命令を賜りましたので。
Why did she kind of stutter there with the Leon thing?
お前も
You don't. Oh, there we go.
いえ、そんな。
後宮リオンは銀の指輪を許された次期当主だ。10年を務めたお前が
So
名
Canon
前を言い
didn't,
よどむのはおかしい。
but she is.
それは。
安心しな。リオンに面識がねえのは俺もだ。次期当主はクラウスのはず。子供もジェシカだけのはずだ。リオンなんてやつが後宮家にいたかけらなんて一つもなかったはず。
Upon hearing that, Will didn't recognize Leon either. Shannon looked back up at him in surprise. Apparently, she was a bit relieved to find out she wasn't going crazy by herself. However, her expression quickly grew uncertain once more.
ここはどこなんでしょう。後宮家の礼拝堂と思います。でもどことなく雰囲気が違います。それにリオン様という方がおられたなんて。なのに旦那様も奥様も親方様もお嬢様も親類の皆様も当たり前のようにお話をされています。何が何だか私わからなくて。
リオンはベルンカステルが置いた駒だ。奴を置くためにさらに大きな猫箱に変えたとも言っていた。それだけでなく、どうもここはいくつかのかけらが継ぎはぎして作られたまともじゃない世界らしい。
It's as though this is a special stage set up specifically for this game. I'm sure she's nodding at my thoughts right now, laughing and chomping down popcorn.
この世界のお前は何年ここに勤めている
？10年です。
I see. So it really is a special stage. After all, right when I entered the chapel, I spotted Kinzo. If Shannon has worked here for 10 years, then this is 1986, the stage of Beato's game. In that case, Kinzo shouldn't exist. However, he definitely was here a few minutes ago. Bernkastel promised that all the information needed for reasoning was gathered here. She must have crammed all manner of stuff in here to make that true. So it really is a special stage.
お前はそれだけの長い間ならベアトリーチェのことをどれだけ知っている？
親方様が深く愛された方くらいにしか。
それだけか？
あとその六軒島の夜の主と言われていて、
そうだ、夜な夜な屋敷を徘徊するとささやかれる亡霊の名もまた。
That brings the number of Beatrices to 3. First is the Beatrice from more than 30 years ago, who is said to have given Kinzo the gold. The second is the Beatrice from 20 years ago, who met Rosa. The third is the Beatrice of the ghost stories, who's rumored to be the master of the night on Rokenjima.
フルドエリカの推理は正しいだろう。もともと六軒島に存在した悪霊の伝説、そこに金蔵のオカルト趣味と謎の女ベアトリーチェの名前や肖像が、碑文が次第に加味されていき、黄金の魔女伝説に統合された。そして夜の闇が魔女という人格を得た。それが3人目のベアトリーチェだ。それが連続殺人犯のベールとなる。
Apparently, she didn't understand a word of Will's sudden monologue. Shannon tried to follow along, but she seemed to be having difficulty.
無理に理解するな。頭痛になら。
申し訳ございません。
カノンもリオンのことを知らないのか。
And here we go into canon now.
はい、カノン君も私と同じでした。
The same as you, eh? Shannon and canon, huh?
カノンも呼んで二人に話が聞く。
This'll be interesting. Will this be possible? When Will said those words, oh, Shannon's face went blank and her eyes went wide.
申し訳ございません。
He can't be here for some reason.
受付を開けることは許されておりませんので、私には呼びに行くことができません。
なら誰か代わりを呼んできて受付を変わらせる。あんたとカノンと。
Maybe Will had that same thought. Like,
リオンを知らない3人で一緒に話がしたい。
受付は一人でいいと仰せつかっております。
2人いちゃいけねえとは言われてねえはずだ。
本日は人手が足りませんので、受付に2人も不要と仰せです。
誰がそう命じた？金蔵か？クラウスか？それともリオンか？確認する。
oh,
私の命令権
the
者
one
です。
who orders me. Ooh, that must be Bernkastel, right?
私は命令に逆らえません。
その命令権者は誰だ？そいつに交渉する。
交渉などできません。
That sounds like Delanor.
私たちの命令権者です。
Although it's creepy that like it goes like sometimes it goes like all caps. Ooh.
ここへカノンを呼べ。俺は拷問も感激も綺麗だ。
Slowly, Will pulled his right hand out of his pocket. When he slowly opened his fist, a small bright glow emanated from it. The flower petal Bernkastel had given him had become a glowing birthmark which sparkled. He held that hand out towards Shannon and slowly approached her.
カノンを呼べ。お前たちに確かめたいことがある。
お呼びできません。
Ooh.
それでもなお、それをご希望ですか？
呼ばねえならお前を感激する。
どうしてもとおっしゃるのでしたら、特別にお呼びすることもできますが。
There was some kind of incomprehensible tension between the two. Will stood there, his left hand still in his pocket, his right palm glowing, stretched out towards her. Shannon just stood there, her hand still folded politely in front of her. Her posture beautiful, and yet it felt oddly as though raindrops were sparkling and crackling in midair.
カノン君を呼んでまいりますが、よろしいですか？
Ooh, this is creepy. Will's expression had remained unchanged the whole time. Shannon's face was still kind and gentle, yet the tension was as icy as a frozen lake. Beginners in chess will sometimes move their king into check without noticing. One might mercilessly capture the king in such a situation, but high-level players are supposed to calmly warn beginners about their mistake. If you take one more step, you'll get captured. This was similar to that. So he's gonna back down, maybe? I see. So after all...
もう分かった。十分だ。二人で交代で受付を頼む。
Feels like by doing that, it breaks the whole game apart. It's like as soon as that happens, what Bernkastel can call checkmate on this game and end it. Slowly, Will lowered his hand.
ご理解いただけまして助かります。
The glow slowly vanished from Will's palm. That completely incomprehensible tension melted away like a sugar cube in water. However, nothing had changed since the beginning. Will's expression and Shannon's expression were the same as they always had been.
おや、お帰りですか?
Footsteps approached them. It was Leon.
立ち話をしていただけだ。こいつに聞きたかったことがあったんだな。
それは何でしょう。そしてそれは得られましたか？
ああ。
お役に立てて光栄です。
それは残念。傘をお探しのようでしたら、すぐにでもご用意させましたのに。
金蔵に話はついたのか？
珍しい客人が挨拶をしたがっていると伝えました。お会いするそうです。
Hey, there we go.
ベアトリーチェのことを聞きたいとは伝えたのか？
それはあなたの仕事でしょ?
With a slightly mischievous look, Leon turned away. Will scratched his head and shrugged, looking annoyed.
まあいいさ。こいつを試すだけの話だ。
Will opened his right hand and showed it to Leon. It was just a hand without anything remotely remarkable about it. Leon's head tilted to the side in bafflement at the strange gesture.
ご苦労様です。君の名前は確か
シャノンです。
そうだった。シャノンでしたね。引き続き受付をよろしく頼みます。肩を冷やさないように。
ありがとうございます、リオン様。
Shannon bowed deeply in response to Leon's kind words. There was not a trace of tension in her manner.
参りましょう。ビル、せっかく時間をいただけたのです。当主様の機嫌は秋の空より変わりやすいですよ。
いってらっしゃいませ。
行くか。
All right, well, a interesting start to this new episode. Instantaneously, almost, we are introduced to two new major characters. A daughter of Kraus that has only been in this fragment so far, Leon, and Will, the detective, it seems, for this game. Yeah, already I'm quite confused, but it seems like we are getting some answers, kind of obvious answers when you think about it. The, the whole thing about the Beatrice from Kuadorian being the daughter, the illegitimate daughter of Kinzo. But there's the implications there that I'm thinking about from the last episode about the connection with Badler and Kinzo, the chick Beato, saying that Badler was her father and saying that she loves him, which kind of hints at a deeper understanding of that. Definitely a darker implication of what that means. Whether or not that's true, we will see. And we also are actually going to be able to speak to Kinzo, so hopefully right from his mouth, we will be able to get some answers. It's as Bernkestel said, we're going to tear the guts out of the story, which I guess means, like, get to the heart of it. And they said that everything that is in this fragment, all these fragments collected in this game, will lead you to the truth. So we'll see if this conversation with Kinzo brings anything new to light to help us discover the mysteries of who killed Beatrice and what that means. So I hope you guys did enjoy the first part of Chapter 7, and stay tuned next week for more. Until then, bye guys. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Kaori Makoto, Revealing Storm, Jared Fan, Tequila Mockingbird, Izzy Ibo, Joel Ustman, Asborn Kennedy, Harry Gazif, iCognito, Locus Corollas, Wusing Chrysalis, and Lumi Arclight.